so I'm back again, and one thing I realised that I haven't done yet is to actually play you anything using this setup as it is at the moment. So, play the sound back. I'm going to reduce the volume a bit actually because it's a bit abrasive. There we go. So you should hear it move at least to the left channel, to the right channel. You won't hear anything else. But as I move them away, and hopefully you can hear. Oh, sorry, I've run out of sound. Let's oops. Let's go back to the beginning. There we go. So if I choose a section and loop it. There we go. So notice that as I've moved away from the left-hand speaker, oops. There we go. We should lose level, so that should now no longer be coming out of the left-hand speaker at all, but it is fractionally from the right. And as you can see from down here, you can see that it should be working in the other channels, except for the LFE, because once again we haven't got any volume specified for the LFE. If I were to bring that up, then you would see that appear. Okay, so enough of that. Right, so there's two reasons why you're not hearing anything from any of the other channels. One of which is simply that this computer doesn't handle any more than 2 channels. But the other reason is because I haven't actually set up any outputs from Reaper to go to those channels. And this is where we need to go back to the master channel and its routing setup. So we'll go back to there. Because this is where you can specify your hardware outputs to make use of your audio interface's physical sound outputs, which of course at the moment, as you can see here, are only using output 1 and output 2. So we can simply add additional pairs. Now you can ask. Actually, oh, I can't. Now this is where we have our problem. So I'm coming back to this because I realised that, as you can see, when trying to add additional hardware outputs, we only have 2 on the Mac, and that means that I don't see anything else to send audio to. So I'm going to put in a very cheap USB 7.1 sound card, and hopefully that will be read by Reaper. And so I'm going to take an interlude now and show you how to specify an audio output from Reaper. For those of you who are using the studios at DMU, you won't need to worry about this because it's already set up for you. But again, if you have your own setup, then you might want to choose another audio interface to work with, in which case this will be useful to you. So if I go into Reaper Preferences, I go down to Audio and Device, then I can choose, and it has appeared, thank you very much Reaper, the USB sound device that I've just plugged in. So I apply this and OK it, and hopefully now if I go back to my routing, whoops, sorry, that's for the channel, there we go, that's right. We should see our 8-channel device. So I've already got our outputs 1 and output 2, which are now labelled front left and front right, but I now need 2 other outputs to give me outputs 3 and 4 and outputs 5 and 6. Now, as I say, this is an 8-channel interface or a 7.1 channel interface, but I don't need the last 2 channels. So now Reaper is able to access our 6 channels of output, which could obviously be physically connected to the relevant speakers. But this is where we run into a slight, not so much a complication, but an issue with 5.1 that you will need to be aware of anyway, and it will affect us here. Because what we need to do is to specify which of our track outputs, our channel, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 channels on each track, how they are going to be routed to our various physical outputs. And you do that by clicking on these outputs, or these drop-down menus here. And at the moment we've got channels 1 and 2 of this track, which would basically be, if we look back down here, these are sending to our speakers supposedly. It's front left and front right. So front left and front right will be going to our front left and front right on our audio interface, but it's also going to outputs 3 and 4 and to outputs 5 and 6, because we've got channels 1 and 2 from the tracks being sent to those outputs. So here is where we need to specify which of these outputs are being sent to our physical outputs. I hope that makes sense. And basically, I guess it's kind of handy that these are kind of arranged in pairs. So left and right would normally be a pair, back left and right would normally be a pair, and front, centre and LFE we can assume are a pair, because they are kind of not attached to a left and a right. Now, normally what we'd probably do is to choose our stereo source of channels 3 and 4 to go to our outputs 3 and 4, and our channel numbers 5 and 6 on the track to go to outputs 5 and 6. We have a slight complication, as I say, here insofar as the surround studio at the university isn't set up like this. So outputs from the physical interface don't go to the same speakers as would appear here. So basically 1 and 2 are left and right speakers, but 3 and 4 are surround speakers, and 5 and 6 are centre and LFE. Whoops, sorry, that shouldn't have happened. So in fact what we want to do is to choose 5 and 6 as our, which are our back left and back right channels from ReaSurround, or from the audio track. Those are, we want to go to outputs, physical outputs 3 and 4, and front, centre and LFE, which are 3 and 4, will need to go to hardware outputs 5 and 6. So I need to change that to 3 and 4. So I acknowledge that that's a rather complicated explanation and won't be relevant to many people, but suffice it to say that you can configure this in a variety of different ways to suit your personal setup at home. And just as a little reminder of all of that, if it's helpful, and hoping not to confuse the issue further, if I open up this Word document, I'll make it a little bit bigger so that it's more visible as well. So, the ITU standard channel order, which you'll find in Reaper, Logic and Audition, is exactly what we've looked at. Can I still see the... There we go. So, L, RC, LFE, LS, RS. So left, right, front, centre, LFE, LS and RS from 1 to 6. Like I say, having to map these to the surround studio channel outputs at DMU, left, right, and then 3 and 4 are LS and RS, 5 and 6 are centre and LFE. So we've had to reverse 3, 4 and 5 and 6 in our configuration to make sure that the relevant sounds go to the relevant places. You may find, this is not relevant to this particular session, but you will find if you work in Pro Tools that things are set up differently again. And this is more of a kind of a cinema setup, although I can't remember, I have to confess, the name for it. But basically it might be channel 1 is L, channel 2 is centre, channel 3 is R for right, channel 4 and 5 are LS and RS, and channel 6 is LFE. But as I say, we don't have to worry about that, but be aware that there are more than one channel order configuration in various systems and setups. Wouldn't it be nice if there was consistency? Well, sorry, there ain't. So I'll get rid of this. So as I say, you probably won't hear any difference. I should be surprised if we hear any difference when I actually try this out, and in fact we won't hear anything at all because I'm now sending to an interface which doesn't have any speakers attached. So let's plug those into a system so that we at least hear channels 1 and 2. So let's play. There we go. There we go. So now you're hearing the speakers in the studio, and you're not going to really hear any difference between left and right because you won't be able to localize in the way that I can. But this should, in any event, be working, and if you set it up like this in Reaper in Studio, you will hear it out of the relevant outputs. Phew. So, sorry about the laborious explanation. I hope it made sense. And let's shut that up for now. So, we have, moving on, we have a mono Reaper, mono to 5.1 setup in Reaper. But like I say, you could also try a stereo or a 5.1 input, and the procedure is basically exactly the same. So let's make a new track to do each of those things. I blithely before said, oh, let's make a new track, and then suddenly it appeared and I didn't say how I'd done it. If you double click in the track display here, then you make a new track. So that's how I did that. So here I'm going to bring in a stereo sound, which again is another pad, almost equally dull, but not quite, because there is at least some stereo movement on it. So I'm going to mute the original track, and this one sounds like this. So depending on your musical or audio preferences, that might or might not be exciting. Let's turn this down a bit. And like I say, the procedure is basically the same. So if you click on Root, and then you go to Track Channels and choose number 6, that's how many channels we want per track for the 5.1. It's being sent to the master send, and we've already set up the master to accommodate our 5.1 routing, so we don't need to do any more with that. We can go straight to a ReaSurround instance, make one, okay. We get exactly the same thing again. This time though, instead of one input channel, we're going to make 2, and so we are left with 2 input channels, which can be moved independently and basically operate in exactly the same way as the mono setup we had before. Now, this I didn't know up until about an hour ago, so I've learnt something through figuring out how to do this tutorial. I was concerned that in fact there was no way to move these channel instances together. I thought you had to move them independently. Well, no, you can actually move them together, and you can do that by command clicking on. So you choose one puck and then you command click on the other one, and they both get crosses attached to them, which means that I can move them around at the same time, which is a great relief because I didn't think you could do that. So that there's that, which means that, for example, if we got our stereo sound and we want to move the whole thing to the rear speakers, then we could do that, and obviously move it around as a coherent stereo object, if you like, with with the movement that's inherent within that original stereo file being preserved, albeit kind of distributed more over the 5.1 space. So that's helpful. Just to point out that I haven't mentioned this section up here, which again I hadn't really looked at until this morning, but it is quite helpful potentially. This is for doing some, I suppose, default movements or behaviours of these various pucks in relation to each other, and so you can do that. You'll notice that they've been set up with particular behavioural types. So left and right, if I move this, you will see that both pucks move to the left or to the right, depending on which way I turn the dial. And you can also do other kind of behaviours. So this second one is on rotate, and if I click on that one, then it rotates both around a central point. Noticeably, by the way, this dial has no end points, so you just keep twiddling it until and the behaviour just keeps continuing in a kind of continuous, as it were, linear, although it's rotating way. Diffusion level refers, I think, to the diffusion of the sound itself, so how far its reach is. So you can specify the reach of both source and, as I was discussing earlier, speaker influence. So it's kind of the equivalent, but for. So I think if I choose that, there you go. You can choose the diffusion, or how wide the influence of that sound object or source is. Other behaviours, low and high. I mentioned that this was in 3D, so if you did have a 3D setup, and by the way you can set up the speakers in 3D as well as move the sources in 3D, then you will see that as I move this, actually yes, they are doing it, but it's kind of hard to see until I do something extravagant. You can see those lines denoting that is vertical behaviour, so that is now above the plane of speakers, and if I go in the other direction, that is now, I think, below the plane of the speakers. So we'll go back to on the plane of the speakers. Sorry, there's a lot of trackpad action here. What else? Expand and contract. That expands those sources from the central point, which could conceivably be helpful, but otherwise keeps them together. And so on. So you can have a fiddle with those and see whether any of them are of use to you. And by the way, if you want to return them to their original positions, you can, or actually original, certainly not my original, but to some default positions, then you can do that. Okay, so I'm going to actually move them apart so that you can see them separately, and then I'm going to join them again by command clicking and moving them. So that's possible, and the same would be true if we had a 5.1 setup to where we wanted to preserve the original 5.1 image but be able to move it around or balance it within a new 5.1 configuration. Quite why that might be useful, you may wonder, but it's possible to do. So I shall. So we'll come out of this channel and make a new channel, which is going to be a 5.1 input channel. So I'll make a new speaker, make it 5.1, so 6 channels again. Make that a bit bigger for consistency. Whoops. And this time I'm going to drag in, go back to my Finder. I have a 5.1 ambience this time, so actually a recorded, I think I've stolen this from somewhere actually, so my apologies to whoever I stole it from. I think it's an old Logic demo file actually. So if I play this one, again we're only hearing 2 channels of it. Okay, but it's a general kind of ambient 5.1, which I presume is of I don't know, trees blowing in a breeze or something. It's kind of general hissy ambience. I think you can hear some bird song in there as well. Notice that we have 6 channels represented here, 5 of which are populated. So that's left, right, centre, LFE, which is not. So there was nothing sent to that channel apparently, and so it remains blank. And then LS and RS at the bottom. So it's consistent with what we talked about. And once again, I can make an instance of ReaSurround. Whoops. And this time we will preserve the 6 input channels that we had before. Except, of course, that 3 appears to be in the wrong place according to our main channel. 4 is, I guess, to some extent redundant because it's the LFE channel and there's nothing on it anyway. So I'll leave it there, but we don't need to worry about it. And so in exactly the same way as I was talking about before, we can choose these channels. Oh, look, I'm shift clicking, and that's also choosing all of these, so it doesn't have to be command click. And I can move them all around as a unit. I could kind of make them by using our expand contract option. I can expand them so that they're actually sitting over the speakers that we were using. Looks like I put channel 3 a little bit, as it were, proud. I could, so like I say, I can move it around, but I could also rotate that image, which could be kind of interesting. So we could rotate the entirety of our 5.1 image and maybe even reverse it. So that again could be kind of interesting if you've made, say, a 5.1 recording and you want to rotate the entire thing. Beyond that, all of the other things I talked about earlier remain consistent, except of course that we've got more input channels here than we had the first time I talked about this input section down here. I think that's it for ReaSurround. Aside from just one other thing, we can automate some of these movements. So it's all very well being able to move these, but what happens if you want to record a movement over time that has a sweep of our entire 5.1 origin or input source to our new 5.1 mapping, as it were. Well, theoretically you could draw automation lines for all of this. I don't think we'll bother because it would be a nightmare to try and work out. But there is the normal automation capabilities of Reaper. And to access those, you click on this little kind of breakpoint indicator that says trim on it, currently at least, and click on that, and that brings up a window with all the possible things you can automate, or all the possible parameters you can automate for a particular channel. Now, as you dump more and more FX effects into the channel, then each of the parameters for those effects get added to this list. And so it becomes rather enormous and unwieldy quite quickly, except that you can kind of collapse them so that the ones you're not using are hidden. What remains are all of your standard automation parameters, so volume, panning, which of course is of no use to us at the moment because we're using ReaSurround instead, width, volume, pre-effects, etc. So those are for your sends and receives, I think, etc. But of course, if we do want to have our ReaSurround captured, or the movements within it captured, then we need to have those visible. And beyond that, this automation mode up here is standard. I mean, it's consistent across all DAWs, insofar as you can choose a variety of different write modes for automation with varying levels of danger, meaning that if you choose write, then everything, every parameter, I think, will be written to, obliterating whatever you had in there before, which is, again, could be useful but is often quite dangerous. Latch means that it will only change or start changing when you actually change a value. So it will only write that automation when you change a value, but it will continue to write that indefinitely, even if you stop moving what it is that you're automating. And then touch is for just when you touch a particular parameter. So again, another lengthy explanation for something which you probably don't want to know about, but I'm going to choose touch for now. And hopefully, if I press play, I haven't tried this by the way, so I might get this wrong. When I press play and move these around, we should, there we go. So at the bottom of the screen you might have seen some additional tracks pop up. So I'll stop that. And these have had automation written to them as I've been drawing, and it hasn't taken every single automation parameter, but it has taken some. And if I click on here, does it show the ones it's taken? Yes, it has. Automatically, it has taken the relevant parameters that have been changed by those movements that I've made in ReaSurround. So input 1, x and y, which was this puck here that was moved. So x and y, and input 2, x and y, input 3, 4 and 5, x and y. So for the coordinates of each of these, it's remembered the movements that I've made. And now if I play that back, because we're in latch mode, as long as I don't change anything within ReaSurround, it will remember them. Okay, so you should at least, hopefully, even from the speakers that aren't, the two speakers that are in the studio, you should hopefully have heard some amplitude changes there, which denote that it was working, we think. As for why this collapsed into the original configuration, I have to confess I'm not sure, but maybe that's something I need to look into as well. So I'm sorry I can't illuminate you on that. If I can, and I can put a comment in YouTube to indicate why that happened, then I shall do so. But I think that's pretty much it, and that should give you a broad indication of how to set up mono, stereo and a multi-channel configuration within Reaper that will enable you to get started with that. And that's it. Let's hope it was recording.